So what will this unit will like help us to figure and like understand is to how to do object-oriented programming. This is one of the main concepts of like application development like right now. It doesn't matter what language you use. It doesn't matter what kind of program you work on. Is it Python? Is it like any other thing? What you do is like application of like object-oriented programming. That helps you to like develop programs in a much like professional way and also like more efficient way. We'll see how it like kind of changes the way that we program as well as um, so we want to get to know about like, okay, how does this like the part that we've talked about in the other courses, which is, hey, we have like tables in the database that store information like about like every data entity. Like it's a car, it's a customer, it's the orders. How actually they are like connected to applications and like how you connect them, load the information and use them to basically for different purposes, whether you want to like let's say in one of like practices we worked on, like the homework you're working on enrollments. This is based on like list, and we'll see, actually we'll talk about it in a minute. So the objective here is to like learn about like object-oriented programming, get to know like understanding about the use of classes, what's a class, the difference between class and object or class versus instances, as well as like other important topics in object-oriented programming. Let's focus on like a new like this application. Okay, so we want to like build an application for like to store information about the car. So let's start with something simple. Every car has its own like unique characteristics, unique things that like you usually want to know or store information about. Let's think of like them as a data entity. If you want to think about them, we would say, okay, I'm going to assign a unique identifier to each of them. I want to know make, their model, their like how much mile, like what's their mileage. You know, when you're like recording information about every auto in your inventory. Um, so I want to make it simple. I don't want to add more like fields here for now. We just want to focus on three of them, and then you will see like how it like develops over time. So if I ask you to like develop an application that these are like features about the car that we want to like collect. And so what you want to do is like get the information from the from the user to provide the information about each auto, like an auto, its make and model, and then print the information. Uh, you would probably just develop this application. Say, okay, I have three important like input variables: the auto ID, the make, and the model. I'll like prompt the user to like provide the information and store them in these variables and then use them for different purposes. Okay. Just want to be like clear. This is going to be very interesting, but also very important like unit. So I hope that like you can like pay attention because it is going to be just a little bit challenging as well to learn the concepts and understanding the concepts. Okay, great. So what if I ask you, okay, so in that like practice, you would get one information about one car one at a time. Okay. Like you can only store information about one auto at a time. You get the information, you show the like display the results. What if I ask you like, okay, now we want to store information about 10 cars, 100 cars, 1,000 cars. What would you do? What would be your solution to implement? Let's start with 10. How you would need to change this app like program. Okay, this is my like code. How do I change it to store information about 10 cars, not just one car? Yes. List. One solution is list. Okay, you would say I create one list of auto IDs, one list for like the make, one list for model, and then put them in a loop for each one of them, get the information and store them. Okay, is there any other solution for it? A least efficient way than like using list.
I think creating like an
Object car. Before we get to the object, based on what we know, probably you would think I can create 10 auto ID 1, auto ID 2, auto ID 3, auto ID 4, right? I can create 10 variables for each of them if I have 10 cars, and then again 10 variables for model, 10 variables for the other one, and store them, right? It doesn't sound right. It doesn't look good. But it's one of the solutions, okay? If I only had like, let's say if I only were able to like create like store information about 2 cars, say, okay, I'm gonna create like I have auto ID 1 and then auto ID 2. So I create one variable for every car and then I store information about that. This is the worst scenario, but that's one of the scenarios. And only like for 2 of them. Why is worse? Because like that means that like, if I have 10 cars, I need to create 10 variables just to store information about the auto IDs. And then 10 other variables, like number them, make 1, make 2, make 3 for other like the mix. Why can I like just use the one and like put it into loop? Because as every time you replace, like you're like setting an information to one variable, okay? If I use this one and put it into like a loop, and every time I got the information and I store it in a variable, the prior information would be lost because you're just replacing the information, right? If I put this part in a loop, in the first round, I get the first auto ID stored in the variable, and in the second round, I get the information, but I'm storing the same variable. So you're replacing it, you're losing the information. That is not helpful. So we have to come up with a different way. So one way is to create like one for each car, one auto ID 1, auto ID 2, maybe auto ID 3 to store information about them. Okay. Then it's the worst possible way. It's not scalable if you have 100 cars. It's hard to manage. If like every time you have to figure out which variable like is storing like information about which car. What is the other solution? A much better solution is to use like lists. So I create one list for like the store information about the auto IDs, a list about makes, a list about the models. And then like put them into a loop. For 2, here I have 2 because I wanted to say I get for the 2. In that case, I'll just need to put this part in a loop, and every time I add them to the list, right? Does that make sense? Is this correct? You see what's happening. We want to store information about them, and also we want to keep them. We don't want to lose the information. So we have to create the list, and then we want to use them. Okay. There are two versions of like the same code. But here's the thing. How about this one? Does this sound exactly right? Let's see. Okay. So we made some improvements. Okay. But we still have a lot of like issues with this, which I think you also faced when you were working with your homework, which is, oh, if I want to figure out what like this student, like this enrollment belongs to which student, I have to first look for the enrollment from enrollment like list and then go find it in the other list. Because you're like storing the information in separate lists. You're storing the information in separate lists. Here, you're storing the information about one auto in separate lists. The auto IDs are here, makes are here, models here. If I tell you like this model, like in the models list, what is the like for the second we have stored like in the second like index in that place, the model is called to like it's a stored to belongs to which car. So you have to go and figure out in the auto ID which car is it. Because these information, these data are stored separately into separate lists. The other problem is that for now, I only have like three features about the car. But you know, based on your database experience, that like there is no table like with a 3 variable. At least you're gonna store 10, 15 like data points about every car. That means 10, 15 lists. Right? How about a student? like a student name, address, ID, like about enrollment. Like we only had just a few of the like variables that I asked you to work on, only just 4 of them, 4 of them. But you know that about the student, you have to store way more than that information. And that means for each one of them, you need one list. And handling them is not going to be easy. How do I, like, if I ask you to, okay, find out this student's information, you have to go through each one of these lists and like figure out which one is for which. And like at some point, you're going to make a mistake. We're going to make a mistake. And it could be out of sync. I could just like simply make a mistake in setting an index for one and like setting a storing information about one student in it for someone else. So you see, so far, the ones that we worked on kind of are helpful, but not helpful as much as like we need them for like in this like real world case. So what would be the solution for it? The solution for it is that why do we like think about them individually? What if we think about them as one single data entity? One single data entity, like one object, like something like, okay, I know every car, okay? I know every car has like some features. Instead of like thinking about them separately, let's think about them as a car, as one single data entity. Let's think about them as a student. Okay, single data entity, single units. These characteristics, these features belong to one object, one thing. And now let's focus on that one thing, which is like, is it the car? Is it a student? Is it a class? Is it department? Think about them as a unit entity that they have some characteristics, but all of them belong to one single like unit, and focus on that unit instead of like one by one like features of those units. Okay. So for that, we have a solution for it. We are going to package them. We are going to put them together and call them a class. And use that like single unit to be able to create like new versions of like our applications. We want to say every unit will have some attributes or fields. What are those attributes? Those characteristics like auto ID, like model, okay, made. But these are just characteristics of one single data unit. And that's what we're going to call, like, we are going to create classes for them or call them classes, objects, and then use that one. Instead of their features, we focus on the unit, not its features, its characteristics, just the unit itself. Okay. Every unit will have its own characteristics. These characteristics are some like data points or like characteristics, like attributes. Think of them as like data entities. Every data entity has its own characteristics, has its own like fields. And the same way, exactly here, we have like the same one for a single data entity and then like their features, which call them fields. What are the operations? These operations are the things that you can do on the data. You would probably work on the SQL query. You had the fields and you had like the tables, and then you would write queries for them separately. But these are the queries that you can run on the data of a table. The same way here, this time, these are like the operations. These are kind of like in terms of a method. These are the behaviors that you can run on it, like on a data that you store about something. Like for example, you store about information about the car. What can you do? You can get the information about every car. You can know which one is available. You can know which like model exists in your database. So you can run operations on the data that you've stored about each of these single units. Okay. We'll call them classes, but we'll see actually like these, like how these classes are implemented and like a little bit more into that topic. But this is just an introduction. Let's like start creating one and then see how it looks like, okay? So there are we use like 2 versions. So if you're a Windows user or Mac user, let me just go through let's create a new project. we're gonna work on the same project like unit 8 auto. So we want to implement that using the one that like we started talking about using a class. Okay. First, you want to make sure that like you have the solution explorer. Okay. Create a new project. Make sure that you have the solution explorer. If you're a Windows user, you want to also make sure that you have your solution explorer. If you don't see it, I think from the view you should be able to find the solution explorer. Okay. I think I have like a slides here if you can find it. A solution explorer. Okay. Did you find the solution explorer? Yes.
Solution.
So this is the Windows. For Mac it's just a solution. You should be able to see here like the project directory. Do you see that? Okay. Okay. So we can create classes. The very first one class that we've been working on is the program class. We actually have been working with classes, but like only with program class. This is like the main class of a program. But now, how do you identify a file is a class by .cs? You see here program.cs. That indicates that it's a class. Okay. And also here we see that it's a class. We want to create our own classes. Here on the project, I will click right. Okay, on the project, click right. And then go to add and then new class. Okay. So you like click right on the project, go to add and then click on new class. Yes.
Do you do it on Windows again?
For the Windows, it should be like if you have this, like on the project, click right. Okay. In Solution Explorer, if you see your directory on that one, like click right, and then you should be able to like see this similarly. Okay. If you click right, you should have the add. You should see the add, and then there is a class. Find it?
No, someone showed up to you.
Did you find the Solution Explorer? Okay, so look up the Solution Explorer, and then from that, like you should be able to click right and find class. Okay. If you're a Windows user, you just need to like choose this class. Like you see this window, you see a class, and then here you type the name of the class. Okay. So if you're like a Mac user, go to add and then add new class, and then you will see this window. You want to create an empty class. You want to remove this and name it as like the way you want. The name of the class should be that like usually like a unit, a single unit. It starts with a capital case. Okay, so like the same way that you would not name a method. So I will call this auto. Okay, you don't need to call auto class. It's a class. You just need to name it the same way that you would name a table in a database. It's a student, it's called like auto, it's a reservation. So exactly the same way that you would name them, you would name like a class. And then create. Okay. So this is our very first like creating like a class in in our like course. For now, like what you see is the namespace. So the namespace like is the same namespace for the project. And then we have like a class public class auto. Okay, public class auto. You should see this, and like do you see these curly brackets? And then inside that, this method. I'm gonna like remove this for now. Okay. I want to start from like it automatically adds it. I want to start from like an empty class. Okay, just empty. If you're a Windows user, like you might see this like an internal class. You can change it to public or just keep it that. It's just like they're both the same. They're very small differences, but that's fine. Okay. So where do we code? We always code here inside the boundary of that class. Okay, so this is our class body. Okay, so this is our class body. And I'm going to add this end of auto class. So that means outside that boundary, I will never add any code. Okay, so that's my boundary. These like curly brackets set the boundary where I code, like I put my code in it. Okay. Okay, so that's what we see here. We want to just like remove them and then start from like just the beginning. So yes.
When I remove the like brackets, it gives me like an error.
Okay, so we want to create a single unit. Okay, so we created a single unit like auto or car. Every single unit has its own unique characteristics. These are like, you can think of them as like a table. If you're creating a table in a database for auto, what are the columns? Think about them as columns. You don't you don't put everything about like an auto, like, you know, like every simple like things, but actual attributes that describe one auto. The same way, these are like we want to add a specific like unique things like attributes of an auto. So we already know what are the attributes that we are looking for. What are they? We learned about the auto ID, the model, and make. These are the three things that we are recording about every auto. So where do we put them? If you know the characteristics of that data like unit, you describe them, you specify them inside the class body. But it starts like with specifying public or private. For now, let's start by only specifying public, then we can talk about it. Okay, so type public, and then specifying the data type the same way that you would like declare a variable, the data type. So for auto ID, I use int and auto ID. Okay, the same way, public, a string, a model. So these are like exactly variables. Okay, that's why you like they're like exactly how you would declare a variable. That's what you're doing here. But this time we are not declaring them inside the method. We haven't created a method. We are declaring it inside the class body. We're gonna see how like it changes the way that we use them. And then public a string model and make. Okay, so what they are telling us is like for every auto, I want to know the auto ID, make, and model. Okay. For every auto, I would need to know auto ID, make, and model. These are characteristics of that data unit, single unit, or data entity. Okay. So how do we use it? Let's just start like with like very simple like version for now, and then we'll see how we can use it. So you see here, I created this, doesn't have any data in it. We haven't like added any data. That's why we actually call them a template. A class is a template. A template for actually any unit that exists in the real world. You create the templates and then you make copy of the templates and use them for storing actual information. So these are templates. Like the same way, like you would create a template and then let's say for a project, you create like a template for like a simple project and then use that template in different projects. The structure is going to be the same. And like whatever you've created in a template, But then the data that you add to each template is different. The one like the copies that you view. So when we create classes, we think of them a template and say, for a template for auto, what are the like the features that I'll probably need to store information about? So I say auto ID, like make and model. So I created that template. Now let me use the template or create a template and actually store information about it. So I go back to the program class. I go to the program class in the main method. If I type auto, okay, now it shows up. Okay, auto. So you see it's green, it's starting with like a capital case, the same way that we have created. And then a space. If you place a space, it suggests you something. So what you're doing here, you're creating an instance from the same template, a copy of that template. You created the template, and now from that template, you can create copies and name those copies. So it suggests that you're naming this copy, like you can name it as an auto. You can name it anything you want. Usually, when you make a copy of a template, you name it with the same name, but it should be with the lowercase. It should start with the lowercase. So that's the way we create them. So I say I'll just use that one. It could be auto 1, auto 2. Like you can name it anything you want. Usually the structure is that we use the same name but with a lowercase.
So what's the name of the title of the program you just or class you just made? Right?
So the class is this. We are making a copy of the class, exactly. Okay. So by creating this, we're creating a copy of the class. The same, how do you know, like an example would be that you don't need to type it, but let's say a string, when I say a string name, I'm actually making a copy of this and then using it for storing an information. The same way, like now we create the templates, and then from the templates we create a copy, and then inside the copy we store information. Okay, inside the copy. So let's see how we can use the copy. In order to use that copy, you need to initialize that. Okay, so if I say auto, once you created the copy, you're going to use the copy. You don't use the class any other reason than just making a copy of it. Okay. The only time that you will use the class here is to make it like a copy or create an instance. We call it an instance of that class. After that, whatever you do with the instance, not the class itself. The class is just a template. We use the copy or instance. Okay. So auto, first I need to initialize it. How do you initialize a class? You say initialize an instance or copy. Auto equals or new, and then auto, and then parentheses. Okay, so here I created a copy or an instance of the class. Okay. Here, initialize the instance. How do you initialize that? Any time with anything, you want to initialize an instance of an object or initialize an instance of a class. You say the copy that you've created equal to new, and then the name of the class, and then parentheses and semicolon. Yes.
So, like, how does it differ, like creating an instance and initializing different? So for the first one, do you just say that, do you just create it, but it's empty? And then
Exactly. So exactly, you're right. So I could have done this in the same line, but I wanted to separate it to tell you this. This part, you're just making a copy. It is null. You cannot use it for storing information unless you initialize it. Okay. This one initializes it. It sets it ready for use. You have to initialize the instance before using it. You can create as many like copies that you want from the like the template, but as long as you haven't initialized them, you haven't kind of like set them ready for use, you cannot use them to store information. So first is to initialize them. You could have done this in the same line, but I wanted to separate it. You could have done this here. I'll use like a different version, okay? If I didn't have this, I could have done this in the same line of code and say auto equals new auto and then parentheses. You're creating and initializing the object. I wanted to make it clear that like you can create an instance without initializing right away. Maybe like at a different point, you will need to use it. So that's the difference. You want to pay attention to the differences here. So now that we've initialized it, now we can use it. So if I type which one I'm using, the class or the instance, okay, the copy that I've created from the template. The template is the class. Then I created a copy. Now I use the copy auto dot, okay. How do I like access? Okay, now I created this single unit, single data entity. Now I have access to its characteristics. Every auto has some characteristics that I've specified, the auto ID, model, and make. And now you can see them, auto ID, make, and model. So I will just say auto ID, okay. I want to like prompt the user to like provide the information. Convert dot to int console that read line. Third, we will store the information about every single unit inside the copy that we've created. So now every copy has its own, the same features that we created. Now we can store the information inside every copy. If you have 10 cars, you just need to create 10 copies of the same class, same template, and then store information about them. The difference is that now, because we created a single data unit, now every auto stores information about its own features, not in separate lists. You see, we would have to create separate lists, one for auto ID, one for like the mic, one for the model. Instead of doing that, we created one single unit and instead every single unit has these characteristics. Create a copy of that and then store information about each one of them. And the same way, now I'll collect the other information. Okay, yes.
So if we add this couple of other IDs, is it gonna end up to be a list of strings or what is it?
For each one of these instances, it stores information about one car. One car. Each instance of the same like template. So our template is called auto. So every copy that you create stores information about one car. Okay. Sure. Yes. Okay. So let's like when you're collecting the information about the car, you're collect like for the same copy. So I'm gonna collect again auto dot, this time the make is console. This is a string. So console dot line. Okay. And then auto dot model. Also like add these titles here just for simplicity. Okay. So this one is the enter make and then enter auto. Oh, model. Okay. Okay. So I created an instance from the class, from the template, and then initialize that, then get the information about that auto, is like for each speech, every characteristic about that auto. So it says the auto ID for that auto. For the same auto, what is the make, what is the model? So every single unit stores every information about itself, every information. It's like a table, and these are its columns. In a table like auto, when you add a row to it, like if you had it like a table of auto, every row would store information, like would show you the information about one single auto. The same way here, now we have this like single instance that stores information about one auto. And now we can like show, like if I want, like if we want to show this, I'll create a string output. Okay, I'll say, okay, auto ID. What's the auto ID? It's the auto ID. Okay. So for the same auto, we want to like print out the information, and you can see every instance stores the complete information about itself. It's not like the list that you separately store them in separate lists. You store everything in one copy about one card. So auto ID, what is the other one? Make. So write my output and then off the console. That's really sorry. Let me just finish it and then I can answer your question. Okay. Yes.
So, and is all that together with the characteristics, does it create an object?
When we created an instance,
Mhm.
we actually created an object. Instance and object are the same thing here. You use different names, but it's like this is an object. You're getting the information about the object and storing it.
Mhm.
Because for now, when we created the auto, it was just a template. It didn't store any information. It was just the template with no information. When we created an object from the class, now you can store information about the object. You get the object's information and then store it in that object.
Mhm.
Okay. So now this copy actually has the information. That's why you can like print out the information about it. And you can see that the auto itself has every information about like itself. Every object has its own, like every information about itself. Objects are cars. So if I have 10 cars, I need to create 10 objects. If I have 100 cars, I need to create 100 objects from one single class that I've created because it's just a template. Yes.
And does like instance and object are the same thing, but for example, does it become an object after you collect the data about it or after you just initialize the instance?
Okay, that's a good question. When you create a copy from a class, you call it object or instance. Both of them are the same thing, like they're interchangeably used.
Mhm.
But once you create that, it's just an object. But then you can store get the information about the object and store it in that object. Okay. Okay. So this is it. Okay. If I run this, it's the same thing. It's the same way. It's like the way that it's running is not gonna change. It's the way that we program is changing. So let me go back to the way I implemented it without the objects. Okay. Do you see the difference here? Let's see what is the difference. I would create variables here and then like store them. But then if I wanted to like they're separated differently. They're like stored differently or separately. And it can be confused, like it can get like in like on sync or like out of sync when like you have more than like storing more than one card's information. But instead of that, okay, you see auto ID, auto make model, and I say, no, let me create an auto and say this auto's auto ID is this, the auto ID's make is this, the auto ID's model is this. Okay, the object needs to know everything about itself, its own characteristics, and only can store information about itself. every time you want to store information about one more car, you need to create a new object. You need to create new object. If you have 10 students, if you have to create one class for students and say every student has a student name, address, phone number, gender, and these characteristics exist for every student. Then you create objects from the class and then you store information about one student. Every student, one object from the class. Okay, so that it works. You create the object, initialize the object, and then use it for storing the information about the object. And this object will always carry all the information about itself until you stop the program. And it gets destroyed. Yes.
So maybe later be adding like methods into like the different classes we create. So instead of like writing all of that in the main, can we just like make it a part of the like auto class and just.
Great. Yes, exactly. So we are gonna kind of like, we want to just, like the point here is that we want to try as much as possible not to have much in the main method or like program class. We're gonna take these things out about like each of them and then put them into that object or that class, that template, and then use them. Okay. So let's go with this and say, okay, this was it, and we can see how we changed it. Okay. So we would create like a instance and then initialize it, or like other way, like both of them are correct, but the difference, we want to make sure that we see the difference. We could create an instance from the class without initializing right away. There are different reasons for doing that. Okay, so we created and we like collected the information. One thing we can do is to actually create the method itself. So we said the class, okay, so here I get the information. I can also like create, I can go back to like the auto class and say, okay, so with every like auto, well, I need like one of the ways that I will need to know about like auto is that getting their information. I can create like methods for them and say, okay, let me add like a class, like a method here, the same way that you would like get a method and say, okay, every time I call that method, it can perform like creating a string of like information about like the auto itself. So how do you add a method to the class? The same way that we've been doing it, like public. Okay, this time, now we are creating methods inside the classes that we create, not the program class. So we no longer add the static at the beginning of the method. Okay, if you're creating it like a class and then you want to create a method inside the class, you don't add the static, you add public. Okay, keep in mind, you add public. Public, I want to like call this like a return a string and like auto, I'll call this auto information. Okay, auto information. So when I call, like, why do I create this method? I want to say when I call that method for an object, I wanted to like return the complete information about the auto. The same thing that I did here. I kind of like want to like do this, like using that method, like I already in it, like probably I'll use it for every auto. So how do I do that? I'll say just like a return, okay, the same way that you would like create a string, output a string here. And then add the information here, auto ID. Okay. So what do I type here? You see that the method doesn't have any parameters. But I wanted to create an output string. I said, so far we've talked about the methods and said we need to supply information to the method so they can use that to like perform a task. But now I'm not going to do that, and we'll see why. Once I type auto ID, it shows up here without passing that in like value or variable to the method. Okay, so I don't have it in the like method parameter, but I can see the auto ID. Why? So this is one of the like important things about classes. We declare the characteristics of the class only the characteristics of the class as the class fields. And these class fields will be accessible directly to all the methods inside the class. You don't need to pass them as a parameter. They will be public. They will be accessible to the methods. Okay, that's why if I just type it, I will have access. Like it will recognize it. It knows it. These are like they belong to the same data entities, so they know themselves. You don't need to pass them as a parameter. Yes.
Then will we like, do we have to collect anything, like initialize the collection of the data inside auto class, or will we just initialize it?
We are just creating a template, right? So we are saying for every auto, we want to have these fields as well as we want to have like this method that if we call, it should like it knows its features, it knows its information, it should be able to create it and then give us the details.
So if we're like creating an instance of an auto class, it doesn't mean that it automatically calls the auto information method instead.
We'll see how you will call the method itself. Let's create it. Okay. So the same way, auto ID model. Okay, I can just type model and it identifies it. And then make. Okay. Now I'll go back here. I'll go to the program class. I'm not going to change this. Like I want to show you the difference. Okay. I'll use the same output, like a variable here. I said every object that you create the object from the same class. So it has everything that you've developed like in that template. So if I type auto dot, this time, now I see the auto information. Okay, it says it's a method. Do you see that M? It indicates that it's a method. So auto information and then parentheses because it's a method. And it doesn't have any parameters, so you don't pass any information and that's it. See what happened? Why this works? Because the auto itself knows its own like values, its own features. Each auto stores information about itself. It's like if I ask you what's your name, you will tell me your name. You know that information. So you always carry that information. And then when I call you, when I ask you something, if you have that like method implemented in you, if I ask you what's your name, you know how to answer it. And use that information that like you've stored about yourself to answer. The same way here. When I say auto information, it knows what it should do. It knows that because we've created the template this way that like if we called it, it should like create this a string and like print like return like that a string to us. And then like you can just print out the output. Okay. So these are like will create the same output. But the difference is that if you create it, maybe you don't need to like use this one because like you already know, maybe like this is one of the things that you want to know about like every auto. Question. Yeah.
So can you then like just create this string output and should declare the ball?
Exactly. Okay. So it's not like you see why, right? If I want to create this, I have to create it every time for every one of them. But this way, I created the method and then I can reuse the same one. I don't need to copy like do this every time I want to do this. If I want to create, like if I want to change the format, then I'll just go back to the template and change the format. It will change for every object that I create from that class. Okay. So we don't need to pass the information to the methods inside the class. They're accessible. These features, so we learned that like we don't need to like pass them as a parameter. They're accessible to the method itself directly. That's why they're identifiable. It identifies them. says this auto, these are features, these are accessible variables. To be like, one mistake I see is that now that we like learn this, we're gonna like put every variable that we want to use as a class field, and that's wrong. Only like, let's say I wanted to use like a counter or a string here, okay? Let's say I wanted to say a string output and then return the string. One mistake I've seen is that, okay, why do I do this? I'm like, I will remove it from here. And then again, just like, let's add every variable, okay, and output. And then I say output is, it worked. But what's the problem? Auto doesn't have any feature called auto output. There is no feature for an auto called output. That's what is important about the field. The fields are the characteristics of that unit. Okay, that makes sense? Okay, so these are the characteristics. This is not a characteristic, it's a temporary variable. The same way that you won't have a column in the table called output, you won't have a field called here. So we shouldn't just move everything as like a public declare, like a publicly declare them and then use them because we want to make it simple. Only the class fields, like the class fields are the characteristics of a class. Okay, are the characteristics of the class. And the other things, they should be only like okay, I'm kind of getting confused here. The temporary variables, these belong to the method. You shouldn't move them outside the method to kind of like make them public, okay? These are local variables. The local variables should still exist in the same method. Okay. Any question? Okay. We're gonna stop here. And I'll stop this. Hopefully it was good to kind of like get to know